So welcome everyone. Thank you for coming back to join us for our session about self-care and how that plays into self-advocacy. Thank you for joining us for more of the advocacy track. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Douglas Hulst and Lisa Gaduco, who are in the advocacy department and who are going to talk about the importance of self-care and how that plays into self-advocacy.
Good afternoon, everybody. On this Friday, October 1st of 2021, it is an absolute pleasure and privilege to be here with all of you today. It's my favorite day of the week. It's the first day of my favorite day of the month and favorite season of the month. And this topic is one of my most favorite topics of all topics. So welcome and thank you for being with us here today. In case anyone is wondering, I'm actually at the DBSA National Headquarters office, downtown Chicago. So back yonder behind me is a lovely southwest view of this fall day. So I believe, Andrew, we do have slides to review Slido. So I think let's take a moment and review a Slido, and then in a second we'll have Lisa introduce herself as well. Oh no, we're not gonna review Slido. When we get to the Slido slides, we'll do a little review then. Lisa, before we go on with the agenda, would you like to just introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, thanks, Douglas. Hi, everyone. If I haven't met you already in previous sessions, my name is Lisa Gaduco, and I am the coordinator for the advocacy team. My main responsibility is overseeing our peer engagement program, which is essentially our peer support specialist training courses. I'm also involved with our advocacy newsletter called Making Mental Health Matters, if you're not familiar with it already. And I also, in addition, provide support with our engagement and work with a coalition out of DC called the Mental Health Liaison Group, or MHLG. This is a coalition of national organizations representing advocates in the mental health space who work with pushing through federal public policies. So thank you, Douglas, and we'll go through the agenda.
Yep. I guess as I was welcoming everybody, I didn't introduce myself. Again, my name is Douglas Hulst. I am the Peer Specialist Workforce Development Program Manager. And what that means is I head up our programs for training peer specialists here at DBSA, and have been doing that for almost three years now. So it's an absolute privilege to try to elevate our peer specialist workforce and all the parts and pieces that go into that process. So we have a very simple agenda for this session, and what I would like to do too is I'm trying to keep myself in a very relaxed place in the session too. And as much as I love giving presentations, there's always nerves when you do it. So I'm trying to be as chill as I can right now, because I'm actually so excited to be leading this presentation with Lisa, and grateful to do it too. But for our agenda, our topic today is self-care. And really how important self-care is, and how it is not selfish care. And that's really it. All it is on this beautiful fall Friday afternoon. We'll do a bit of a grounding exercise. Lisa and I are going to share more in depth about ourselves and our journeys and what led us and brought us here to DBSA. We're going to ask you about your practices. We're going to get into some deeper and specific definitions of self-care. We're going to talk about something to be concerned with, which is sort of a pop culture definition of self-care. And then how there are many pathways in recovery, many pathways in wellness, many pathways in self-care, some new changes in perception, and then we'll end with what Lisa and I like to call the great takeaway. Next slide. So we're gonna do a virtual grounding exercise, and a few of you may have participated in our DBSA Boston chapter's grounding exercise meditation circle on Wednesday. I was lucky to be a part of that group as well, and I was sincerely struck by how powerful that exercise was. I dozed off for a moment, and then I was in a very calm, alert state when it concluded. So I certainly don't know that we'll be able to replicate anything like that today, but hopefully we can simply slow the thought process down in your mind. And when I was exposed to grounding exercises, awareness exercises, meditation exercises, the way it was presented to me was there's no need to empty your mind. There's no need to think or feel or believe that no sounds will happen or interruptions will occur. It's really just to be aware that all of that is possible. But we're going to just take a moment to try to calm our mind and slow our mind. So what I would ask all of you on this virtual session right now is to, first of all, know that this is just an informal session, and you may be distracted, as I just mentioned, and it's all okay. You may sneeze, your mind may race, all of that's okay. But I would ask you to simply get as comfortable as you can right now, and find a posture sitting up or lying down or on the floor. Adjust your clothes so they're maybe a bit looser. Just become comfortable in whatever makes sense for you. And you may wish to turn off your camera if you would like. If you would be more comfortable, you may turn off your camera. If you would like to close your eyes, certainly close your eyes, whatever is most comfortable for you. And just to explain what to expect, I'm going to sound my meditation bowl here in a moment, and then we'll begin the grounding practice. I'll talk us through the experience, and at the end of it, I will actually have us just sit in silence for a moment. And when the silence has concluded, I'm not going to be speaking, so just know that is coming. And I will sound the meditation bowl softly 3 times to let you know that it is okay to slowly and comfortably open your eyes. So become as comfortable as you can, and I'm going to sound the bowl, and I hope we get a nice sound through the digital realm of Zoom. So simply begin to notice the breath. Notice your body and how you are sitting or laying. Just become aware of your surroundings, what you may see. Soften your gaze or notice the color or the light if your eyes are closed. Notice what you may smell. Notice what you may hear off in the distance, and just know that it's all okay. And as you settle into that softness, that gentleness of just an awareness of this present moment, begin to have a little bit of focus at the top of your body. And notice your head. Begin to feel a soft energy coming down upon your head, a warmth, a tenderness that just slowly begins to wash all over you. Notice any tension you may be carrying in your forehead, your brow, your jaw. Notice any tension you may be carrying in your neck and your shoulders. And allow that tension to begin to simply wash down, and to spill down your arms and your forearms and down your hands and to trickle out your fingertips. Notice any tension you may carry in your chest or your belly. Notice any tension you may carry in your seat. So many muscles there, so much tension can reside there. Simply let that tension begin to soften, and let any tension you may have in your upper body, in your arms, in your biceps or triceps, just slowly spill downward and trickle out your fingertips. Tension in your belly, tension in your seat, just simply washes down your legs, goes down your calves, and spills out your toes. Notice your thighs. Notice those calves. Notice your feet. Any tension you may notice or feel or sense, just let it go. Let it wash down. Let it slide downward. It spills out your fingertips. It spills out your toes, and it enters into this entire globe and is gone. It is being released. You have the power of choice to the best of your ability, just let it go. And let the tension you may feel in your upper body, your arms, your belly, your seat, or your legs, just simply wash downward and outward. You may notice a light or a color. You may notice a memory. If a thought arises, it can be like a cloud that passes in front of you and is then gone. But if you have a memory, a pleasant memory, allow yourself to focus on the joyful things you recall from that memory, the smells, the sounds, the sights. You may just feel a warmth or a tenderness around you, and allow your body, your mind, to just let that warmth or that tenderness engulf you. And let that simply be this moment now. Slowly, the tension slides downward and outward. Just an awareness for the moment, or memories, or smells or sounds that bring you joy. Just for a moment, we will sit with those. So in your own way, you may open your eyes if they were closed, or you may leave your camera off if you'd prefer, or turn it on. But allow yourself to come back slowly with no pressure. And hopefully there will be a residual calm that will stay with you for the rest of our time, and hopefully for a significant time today. All right, Andrew, next slide. So if you'd like, you may scan the barcode for Slido or join slido.com #advocacytrack. And let us know what was your experience with this grounding exercise, this meditation exercise, and the silencing, the slowing of the mind. Any reactions to that? Any one-word thoughts or expressions? And we may not get any right now because nobody may wish to choose to use Slido. It may be a good thing that there's not a lot or any in Slido. All right, let's move forward. I'm gonna turn it over to Lisa.
Thanks, Douglas. We did get one response, vivid colors, which is always a good thing. This actually sounds really beautiful. And thanks, Douglas. I really appreciated that, especially as you mentioned, in times where you're put in a situation where you're presenting or speaking publicly, there's always the butterflies and anxiety in my stomach. So what I did notice, to offer my experience with the grounding exercise, my breathing and definitely my chest and stomach areas feel a lot more relaxed than when we first started. And it's always good to clear our minds, or clear my mind, and get connected with my body. I appreciated that you did the body scan, because that's what I usually do. You know, I start from the head. I always feel it in my head, and I have a thing where my stress and it's concentrated in my jaws, so that helped to relax. And also back to the thoughts of that were spinning previously. They're still sort of spinning, but I mean, I think the way you let it, you know, there was a release of it, that I don't have to hang on so tightly to these thoughts, and that's an awareness that I've become more accepting about over the years, that when I do these grounding exercises, or pause long enough to pay attention to my thoughts, my emotions, and my body, certainly. One thing that I've been struck with over the years that I've been doing this type of a self-care exercise is that I don't have to clutch on or hang on for dear life to my thoughts. And to a larger extent, I don't have to stress out or suffer with some of these thoughts. I just have to be here, as you so beautifully guided us through, and just sit and notice that as these thoughts go by, and release it. The other thing that I'm usually struck with, because my goal is to do this type of exercise with more consistency and regularity, I'm always pleasantly surprised how this exercise works, you know, with like just calming everything down. You know, I know there have been like studies and evidence-based research where, you know, the connection of slowing down our thoughts, our breathing, our mind, and our body has more benefits than not, right? And again, this takes on, you know, it's unique for each of us. You know, we may gain this type of relaxation or clearing out our thoughts, you know, through running, knitting, to some extent, maybe watching Netflix to some extent. So again, this type of self-care isn't obviously for everyone. And there's as many and different forms of self-care that are as unique and to each of our individual journeys. But for me, I'm always curious of how others gain this sense of calmness and relaxation. So right now I'm feeling, with my thoughts slowed down and a little bit clearer to focus on our topic for today and this afternoon. I just wanted to point out that these types of exercises seem both so simple and maybe even difficult to do initially. But for me, it continues to have an impact for the better. And I know self-care is definitely a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I know through working closely in the last couple of years with Douglas, it's also true for you. So if we haven't expressed it before, this is really an exciting presentation and conversation to have with you all this afternoon. So thank you if I haven't said thank you already for being here. And thank you, Douglas, for leading us through that.
So thank you to Lisa, and thank you to everyone present. It sincerely it's an honor to be speaking about these things. It's an honor to lead a meditation, an exercise like that. For a great many years, I thought I didn't have the training or the skill set to do things like that. And I had a mentor that encouraged me to simply explore. And I've always been stunned by how I feel when I lead a meditation or a grounding exercise, and always surprised by the responses most of the time, not all the time, from those that participate. And, I think about this week, the presentations I've been involved with, and there's always an inspiration for them. And I think for me, part of the inspiration of this presentation is, as I believe I mentioned a moment ago, I believe in this topic so much. I think one of the most fascinating questions we can ask ourselves right now is, why is the topic of self-care, though becoming more popular and more known, but why in general is it still so hard to embrace in the United States culture in particular? And I have my own set of theories on that. We're in a society that says faster is better, more is better, more stuff, bigger titles, more money, all of it. And I think the practice of self-care pushes against that and essentially says, I am enough as I am. And as I reflected upon that, I began reflecting on my own journey. And it's surprisingly, I think, given how much time I've spent alone during the pandemic, I can see now the chapters of how my exposure to and my understanding of and my awareness of self-care and self-love unfolded. And it really, as I sometimes I was going to mention earlier, I didn't mention it today. My wellness journey has 3 big bullet points, and I share that with everybody because I feel a sense of obligation to share it. It comes easily for me to share it, but I also feel a sense of obligation to share it for others where it doesn't come easily so they can hear it. Coming to terms with my sexual orientation, dealing with depression and anxiety in my 20s, and then dealing with a substance use disorder issue in my 30s and early 40s. Those big 3 things are my 3 big wellness points. But self-care has always been there, at least since I was quite young. And so I was reflecting on how and where and why. And it really started with, I had a cousin who she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at the start of her career as an artist, and it was a huge blow to my family. And she and her partner began to sense that I was a young gay boy, and they they offered, I went and stayed with them briefly, but at one point my cousin sent me a letter when I was 15, which basically said, you're special and you're unique, and don't ever be anything but you. And I still have that letter today. And it was like this first very conspicuous memory I have of valuing self. You know, I have loving parents, was very fortunate to have loving parents, but this letter from my cousin was this first thing that came out of nowhere that said, take care of you. And not long after that, in high school, I began to notice things that slowed my mind down. I tend to be a fast thinker, and when I was younger, you know, a lot more energetic. But I noticed silly things like burning a candle, or a bit of incense, or certain types of music really slowed me down. And although I couldn't articulate this at that time, I knew there was something good there, and I knew there was something of value there, because I really, I felt better when my mind was slower, and I felt better, you know, when I reflected upon that letter from my cousin. And so what I hope to ask everybody now in this moment is just what you see up there in the slide. What are those small things throughout your day that either you're fully aware of, slow your thoughts and bring you joy and allow you to focus on caring for yourself, all the way to what are the things that perhaps you've never realized are doing that and are helping you, and tiny things throughout each day that help your mind to slow, that help remind you, hopefully, that you are a being of value. So think about that as we go forward, or what are those tiny things each day that bring you peace and joy? Lisa.
Thanks, Douglas. So my big picture in daily life, and a little bit of my own personal journey, I really appreciate questions like this, just because, you know, it causes me to pause long enough, right, to take stock and assess where I'm at. And we're talking about self-care, so we start with self. You know, we mentioned before how our journeys are unique and individualized. I would also add to answer Douglas's question of where do you find joy and peace in our daily life, that the states of joy and peace and joy are also dynamic and obviously change with time. And at the same time, again, to echo Douglas's experience and comment, over time, there are also seeds and constants that were planted in my life early on, as I'm assuming for all of us. So my own personal foundation was and still is the importance of family and community. I'm from an immigrant family from the Philippines. I am an immigrant, which my 19-year-old son has a hard time understanding this concept, because my family and I moved to Chicago when I was 6 years old. So while I may sound and behave like an American, I consider myself to have an appreciation for both of my cultures. You know, it wasn't until I, as an adult, that I recognized and accepted that the immigrant experience in and of itself came with its own set of traumas, especially as a person of color growing up in a predominantly white suburb of Chicago. This experience, along with trying to navigate a home life that honored our original language, our culture and homeland, made for a really interesting balancing act as a kid. You know, my parents had what can only be described as an exceptional work ethic, each working multiple jobs at different times during my childhood. And this home life was not really talked about at all at home, because there was an expectation that my four brothers, sister, and I were already to know how to navigate on our own during the school week. But despite all this, despite the lack of emotional intelligence at the time and support, my family and I moved through and moved through and ahead, relying on one another, our extended family of relatives. We relied heavily on laughter. As my colleagues at the office would know, I giggle a lot, for better or worse. My family and I also love music and films. We relied heavily on Filipino Catholicism, education, American sitcoms, really big in our household, and also Chicago's Filipino community to create a Filipino-American life. My parents have since passed away, and there's something about death that can neutralize the most mentally and emotionally charged memories or trauma, because the only one left to reconcile was, and it continues to be, me. So my general areas of peace and joy when it comes to answering this or pausing long enough to think about this concept, is definitely from self-awareness, which in my case refocuses my attention to my own self-talk and where I need to practice patience and compassion towards me. And relationships, health, nature, and lastly, I can't talk about this topic without acknowledging that it's always within the context of gratitude that I experience peace and joy in my daily life.
So we'll try Slido again, no pressure. What words or thoughts come to mind when you contemplate your definition of self-care? Exercise. Being easy on myself, peace. Spirituality. We'll end with that one. Forgiveness. Necessary, but often not intentional enough. Thank you so much. All right. So self-care, self-care. So I looked it up in the dictionary, and I know this is a bit silly, but I had never done it. Self-care, noun. Definition of self-care, care for oneself. For example, stroke victims capable of daily self-care. Examples of self-care in a sentence. This is my favorite one. Pore strips were probably my first introduction to self-care. So this is what we find in the dictionary. It's a good place to start. But what's found in the dictionary is not the only and the absolute definition of self-care. As time and society move forward, language evolves and changes. So let's think for a moment on our own personal definitions of self-care. I'll share mine with you, and then we'll let Lisa take over. But as we do that, just think for a moment on how you define self-care. So for me, this is how I do it. Self-care is the intention, thought, emotional, and behavioral discipline to engage in activities which help me be the healthiest version of myself. Only I can know what's best for me, so I am fully accountable and responsible to discover these and to implement them. Again, this is me. Self-care is not about doing whatever feels good and healthy. For me, it's about striving to engage my thoughts, emotions, and behaviors in ways which continually support my most optimal wellness. my intuition and my gut, that place where my intellect, emotional, and behavioral, and something beyond I can't comprehend meet. Guide me to know which daily disciplines and practices are best for me. So that's my version of my definition of self-care. Lisa.
Thanks again for sharing your thoughts, everyone, with us. For this part, we really just want to stress how unique, self-care is to each of us, to you. And as we saw in your responses to the question, there's definitely commonalities and threads that run through each of us, but there's also obviously our unique, our journey and also perspective on self-care. And this is perhaps the most key point in this presentation, and again, we stress that there are common and easy to understand definition to the concept. Each of our definitions is definitely unique, again, to each of us, and unique to you. So, the message is it's unique and therefore we're not alone, right? And I think that's where we're headed with this presentation, or that's what we want to stress is going from self to community, and that, that support is always here, especially as an organization, or DVSA. We'll find commonalities and also differences.
So this was, as I was working on the presentation with Lisa, this was something I knew that I wanted, somewhere inside I knew I wanted to talk about this, but I didn't know what it was called, and I didn't know how to talk about it initially. And I may do a poor job right now, but I'll try to do my best to explain it, which is what is authentic, genuine, and truly healthy, and what is little less so, or even unhealthy if taken a bit too far. And this is the agenda item on our agenda slide earlier of pop culture self-care. And it's a pretty straightforward and basic point, which is there's a difference between what I guess Lisa and I would talk about as authentic and genuine self-care versus sort of a pop culture sentimentality. And to ask all of you to hopefully strive to be aware of that, and to be mindful of it. And what do we mean by that? And, the public at large, more than say 10 years ago, certainly more than say 20 years ago, is talking about mental health and wellness. There's no doubt. And especially given all the stressors of the pandemic, it is one of the greatest silver linings of the pandemic, which we'll talk about in a moment too, that there is more of a spotlight on this topic, and hopefully that spotlight will continue to shine. You're going to see probably millions of internet URL pages devoted to self-care, millions of memes about self-care, and in general, that is a good thing. I'll be very specific about my opinion there. That's a good thing. But there's just a word of caution, which is, when you see a meme and that says, time for my self-care tonight, and it's a picture of a person holding a giant magnum of wine to their mouth up like this, that's perhaps crossing a line a bit. And certainly enjoying a glass of wine or a cocktail is very much can be a healthy self-care practice. But the idea of just overindulgence and sort of recklessness, all in the spirit of, well, I just need a break and I just need to take care of myself. And if it's all about just self-care, so leave me alone, there's a risk there. And that's the point I think Lisa and I wanted to make in our presentation, is that without a doubt, everyone's self-care practices are unique. And the more the public talks about it, the better. But there's also the slippery slope of overindulgence, or behaviors that maybe start out healthy and then go down the road and become unhealthy. And as someone who used to be a drinker, certainly there was a time when after work, a drink for me was very much a coping mechanism that was not unhealthy. But then over time, it became very healthy and destructive and turned to dependency. So just be aware of that. Be aware that that is there, and be mindful of it. Next slide.
So for me, and what helps my self-care is being mindful of going back to the basics of food and water or nutrition. Definitely sleep as foundation to my well-being and my wellness and my health. Stress management, my self-talk and paying attention to the thoughts that run through my head and how this affects obviously my thoughts and my emotions. Reaching out for support, you mean by in all forms of support, from reaching out to family, friends, and certainly peers, to reaching out to resources and information that'll create value in how I care for myself. So in the past few years, I've been making incremental shifts or baby steps towards this notion that in my little world, how I respond to me, first and foremost, others, and my environment is my sole responsibility. I remember when this thought or concept finally sunk in, and it was a moment of acceptance and certainly empowerment to know that I can create this change for myself. And at the time, it was explained to me by my mentor that I have 100% responsibility and zero guilt in how I care for myself, that in turn eventually affects my relationship with those around me. Self-care is definitely a balancing act in and of itself, and to approach it and me with self-compassion, forgiveness, as someone had mentioned earlier on in the questions, grace and patience. It's definitely an ongoing management and process.
So when I was in formalized treatment for substance use disorder, SUD, alcohol use disorder, AUD, clinicians presented me and others with the following concept. There's many pathways to recovery. There's many pathways to wellness. There's many pathways when it comes to self-care. And it's really just that simple. There is no one size fits all. And there may be commonalities, there may be common threads, but it's just as the idea oversimplistically presents itself, where if you envision a mountain, there are many pathways up that mountain. And you can choose multiple pathways. Sometimes your pathway may run parallel with another person, and you may reach out and hold each other up as you go up the mountain. But ultimately, your journey is unique, and what works for another person may or may not work for you. And what works for you one day may not work for you another day or later in the day. But truly, the idea is that there are many pathways to wellness and self-care. There is no one size fits all. There is no cookie cutter, and hopefully never will be. Next slide. So this is one of my favorite slides because it's just that cheesy, blank canvas, empty book, cliche, but really it's also a thing of beauty because it's true. Your journey, your wellness, your self-care, your practices are for you to design, to define, and to discover, and to paint like a painting. That's a canvas. To write in like a blank journal, as you see. It's really all yours. And this is perhaps the second heart of our presentation, just the idea that when you take care of yourself, when you are at your best, not only will you live in wellness that is most optimal for you, but you will be then at your best for all others you engage with, your family, your friends, your co-workers, and strangers on the street. To me, it's the great conundrum of why it's so hard for us here in the States to understand that when I take good care of myself, I'm really going to be at my best for everyone else. And perhaps you've heard the story, the example of when the plane is going down because it's doing a water landing, it's not about to crash, and the oxygen masks drop. If you put masks on someone else first, you may pass out. But if you put the mask on you first, you will then be stable and can support others through that time of crisis. That's it. That's the core. When you are at your best, and when you take steps to be at your best, even fight for your time and your right to be at your best, you'll be best, better for everyone else. Next slide.
So this area came out of a conversation that Douglas and I had, as far as especially because of the current situation of the pandemic. We've noticed that there's an awakening of sorts happening currently, and we wanted to address this. And it probably even before the pandemic, this has been a truth for some of us, and so we've witnessed more blatantly because of the quarantine and the pandemic, that there are those who want to keep the status quo and maybe even going a little backwards at times. And then there are those who seem to want to break down these long-held beliefs when it comes to self-care and how we affect others of our own choices for ourselves. The pandemic has certainly shined a spotlight on the importance of health and wellness, and looking at a life through a lens focused more on healthy experiences and memory creation, right? Versus maybe solely material acquisition or gain. And this isn't to say we're not saying that, that there's absolutely nothing wrong with hard work and success and being able to enjoy the opportunities and the items that can result because of this. But Douglas and I in our conversation have become aware that there is a new focus on the balancing of that tightrope walk between hard work and effort and the rest of our lives that comes with it. So through the daily discipline of self-care practices, and this tightrope walk becomes less difficult, we believe, and in our comfort level to respectfully push back and challenge the belief that success can come at all costs. And also acknowledging and accepting eventually that there are going to be positives and negatives along the way and in the journey. And if you want to call it darker clouds and silver linings that come with this experience and this journey. Next slide.
Because lastly, that's it. Not much more to say about that. Self-care isn't selfish. It is an act of love and compassion and kindness for yourself, which spills out like ripples in a pond, benefiting all those you interact with. So unless there are any comments or questions, Lisa, both of us just thank you with gratitude, humility for honoring us today. I hope both of us, Lisa, please chime in. You have a wonderful afternoon and evening, wonderful weekend, and a beautiful fall season as we move into that.
There are no questions in the chat. If you do have a question for Douglas or Lisa, you can also feel free to use the raise hand feature in the reactions, and we can unmute you and you can ask your question. Otherwise, thank you for joining us to learn more about how self-care can be a part of your self-advocacy and work toward your wellness journey. And we invite all of you to join us for the next session, which will be around the language that we use and how that affects the conversation about mental health. The tone of the conversation affects the outcomes of the conversation. We will be getting started at the top of the hour. You're welcome to stay in this same Zoom room if you would like to. You can also rejoin us if you do go out to the lobby. We're just going to change around our slides and get set for that to begin at the top of the hour.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.